The sun crested the eastern horizon, painting the red rock spires of Arches National Park in shades of gold and rust. I'd been a park ranger here for 12 years, patrolling these desert trails before most visitors even stirred from their campsites. The air was already warming, carrying the faint, dry scent of sagebrush and sun-baked sandstone. My boots crunched over the gravel path leading to the delicate arch trailhead. It was early May, peak season kicking off, and the parking lot below was filling with out-of-state plates, RVs from California, sedans from the Midwest. Routine morning rounds, check for overnight damage, remind folks about the no-trace principles, make sure no one's wandered off the marked routes into the slot canyons. Arches had been my home since college, a place where the vastness taught you humility. The wind picked up, whispering through the fins of rock like it always did at dawn, cooling the sweat already beading on my neck. A lone hiker passed me on the trail, nodding without stopping. He looked fit, mid-40s, the type who came for the solitude. I radioed base camp as protocol. Ranger patrol, delicate arch trail clear so far. Heading up. Static crackled back from dispatch. Copy that. Quiet night. Few reports of coyotes near the window section. I clipped the radio to my belt, adjusting the strap of my pack. Inside, water bladder, first aid kit, bear spray repurposed for anything that lunged these days, though out here it was more for rattlesnakes than grizzlies. The trail steepened, switchbacks carved into the slick rock, and I felt the familiar burn in my calves. This park didn't forgive the unprepared. Heat stroke in summer, hypothermia if a freak storm rolled in. I'd pulled more than one dehydrated tourist from these paths, their skin salty under my hands as I administered fluids. By the time I reached the viewpoint overlook, the arch loomed ahead, that iconic freestanding span against the endless blue sky. A handful of visitors had beaten me there, snapping photos, their voices echoing faintly off the stone. One family, mom, dad, 2 teens, posed for a selfie, oblivious to the fragile cryptobiotic soil crust underfoot. I made a mental note to circle back with the education spiel. That's when the radio hissed again, not from base, but a fragmented transmission from another ranger. Devil's Garden. Something off. Visitors acting strange. Feverish. Aggressive. I paused, thumb hovering over the button. Must be a drill or miscom. Rangers trained for wildlife incidents. Lost hikers. Flash floods. Not vague strangeness. The wind shifted, bringing a distant murmur from below, like voices carried on the breeze, but sharper, urgent. I keyed the mic. No response. Just more static, laced with what sounded like a muffled shout. Descending toward the trailhead, the parking lot came into view. More cars now, doors left open, a few people milling about. One woman leaned against her SUV, clutching her arm, her face pale under the wide brim of her hat. She wasn't moving right, jerky like she'd twisted an ankle on the uneven ground. I quickened my pace, the sun's heat pressing down, turning the air thick. As I approached, she looked up, eyes glassy. Ranger. My husband. He got bit by something up there. Her words slurred slightly, breath coming in short gasps. I knelt beside her, keeping distance per protocol. Ma'am, sit tight. What bit him? Coyote? Snake? She shook her head, pointing vaguely toward the trail. No, a hiker. He just attacked, like he was rabid. My stomach tightened. Rabies didn't spread person to person, and no hiker would assault another without cause. I scanned the lot. A man staggered from the restrooms, shirt torn, blood streaking his side. He lunged at a parked truck, pounding the door with fists that didn't stop. This wasn't a fight or heat exhaustion. Visitors froze, phones out, filming instead of fleeing. The wind carried a low groan from him, animalistic, pulling at something primal in me. I stood, hand on my radio. Dispatch, this is Trail Patrol. Code 10 at Delicate Arch Trailhead. Possible medical emergencies, multiple. Need backup now. Static. Then a burst. All units, quarantine, infected. Moab reporting similar, infected. The word hung in the dry air like dust. 12 years in Arches, I'd seen bar fights at the visitor center, lost climbers in the canyons, even a mountain lion sighting that cleared the park. But this, people turning on each other, eyes vacant, movements wrong, it shattered the routine I'd built my life around. The man from the restrooms turned toward us, shambling faster now, mouth open in a silent snarl. The woman beside me whimpered, scrambling back. My pulse hammered against my ribs, the weight of my sidearm suddenly heavy on my hip. I drew it instinctively, training kicking in. "Back away! Stay down!" he charged, feet kicking up red dirt. No hesitation. No humanity left. The shot echoed off the arches, a crack that silenced the lot. He dropped, but in the distance more figures emerged from the trails. Hikers, families, all wrong. Arches wasn't just rock and sky anymore. It was ground zero. I grabbed the woman's arm, pulling her toward my patrol truck. "We need to move, now." The desert heat closed in, but a chill settled deep. This park, my sanctuary, had just become a trap. The woman's grip on my arm was vice-like, her nails digging in as we bolted across the parking lot. Red dust billowed under our boots, coating the air with a gritty haze that stung my eyes. I shoved her into the passenger side of the patrol truck first, slamming the door before circling to the driver's seat. The engine roared to life with a familiar rumble, the only sound cutting through the rising chaos, groans echoing from the trails, a child's scream piercing the morning calm. I floored it, tires spinning gravel as we peeled out of the lot. The truck bounced over the uneven access road, Arch's iconic fins of rock blurring past the windows. My hands clenched the wheel, knuckles white against the worn leather, heart still pounding from the shot. That man, visitor, hiker, whatever he'd been, hadn't even flinched at the warning. His eyes were empty pits, fixed on movement like a predator in the wild. I'd put down coyotes with less remorse, but this felt like erasing a piece of the park's fragile peace. She huddled against the door, breath ragged, clutching her injured arm. Blood seeped through her sleeve, dark and sticky. "He was fine an hour ago," she muttered, voice cracking. "We were just taking pictures at the arch, then he changed." I kept my eyes on the rear view, scanning for pursuit. Figures staggered into view behind us, more infected spilling from the trailheads, their shambling forms silhouetted against the rising sun. No time for questions. "Name?" I asked, voice steady from years of calming panicked tourists. "Ellen. Ellen from Ohio." She wiped sweat from her brow, the cab filling with the metallic tang of her blood mixing with the truck's dusty interior. "Alex," I replied, though protocol said identify first. "Ranger training. Assess, stabilize, extract." But the radio on the dash spat static, no backup en route. Moab was 20 miles east, the nearest town, and if their reports were real, it was already a mess. I veered onto the main park road, heading toward the Devil's Garden area, higher ground, fewer access points. Objective clear in my mind. Reach the ranger substation there. It had supplies, a reinforced door, and a direct line to state dispatch if the networks held. From 12 years patrolling these canyons, I knew the back routes. The main drag would be clogged with abandoned vehicles by now. The road twisted through stands of pinyon pine, their needles whispering against the truck's sides as we sped by. Heat shimmered off the asphalt, already pushing 90 degrees, turning the air inside thick and oppressive. Ellen peeled back her sleeve, revealing a ragged bite on her forearm, teeth marks deep, edges inflamed. My gut twisted. Wildlife bites I could handle. Clean, irrigate antibiotics from the kit. This, it looked like a feral dog attack, but the timing... "Keep pressure on it," I said, tossing her a bandage from the glove box without looking. "We'll get you fixed at the station." Lie or not, she needed hope. The park's vastness usually worked in our favor. Isolation kept problems contained. But today, it amplified the dread. No sirens from highway patrol, no chopper blades chopping the sky. Just the endless red rock horizon, mocking our speed. A mile in, the first obstacle hit. An overturned RV blocked the road ahead, wedged against a boulder like a beached whale. Brakes screeched as I swerved, the truck fishtailing on loose gravel. We skidded to a halt 50 yards short, dust clouding the windshield. Infected milled around the wreck, 5, maybe 6, drawn by the crash of whatever had flipped it. One, a burly guy in hiking gear, turned toward us, his head tilting unnaturally, mouth agape. Ellen gasped, pressing back into the seat. The scent of her fear sweat mingled with the dry earth smell seeping through the vents. I killed the engine. Silence crashing in. Stay put. I'll clear a path. Sidearm in hand. Glock 17, 15 rounds left. I slipped out, using the door as cover. The desert wind tugged at my uniform, carrying faint groans on the breeze. Arch's terrain was my ally. Uneven ground, rock outcrops for vantage. I circled wide, boots silent on the sand, aiming for the RV's blind side. The first infected lunged from behind the vehicle, faster than the shambler at the trailhead. I fired twice, center mass. Park protocol for threats adapted from bear encounters. He dropped, but the shots echoed like thunder, pulling the others. They swarmed the wreck, clawing at the metal, ignoring the bodies piling up. Back at the truck, Ellen's face was ashen through the glass. I waved her over, but she froze, pointing past me. A new figure emerged from the RV's shattered door. A woman, mid-30s, covered in blood, but moving deliberate, not staggered. She clutched a tire iron, eyes wild but human. "Help!" she called, voice hoarse. "My kid's inside!" Moral snag hit like a rock slide. 2 civilians, 1 bitten, Ellen, potentially turning. Protocol screamed triage, secure the healthy, isolate the exposed. But leaving a child? The park's code drilled into me. No one left behind on the trails. I hesitated, gun trained on the shadows around the RV. "Alex!" Ellen whispered urgently from the truck, her bandaged arm trembling. The infected closed in, their shuffling feet grinding sand. Decision locked. Extract the mother and kid first, then reassess Ellen. I nodded to the woman. "This way. Quiet." She bolted toward me, tire iron raised, and I covered her retreat, dropping another infected with a suppressed shot that still rang in my ears. We piled into the truck. Her name was Maria. Kid, a boy named Luca, 8 years old, wide-eyed and silent in the back seat. The added weight bogged us down as I gunned it off-road, bouncing over scrub toward a maintenance trail I knew skirted the blockade. Branches scraped the undercarriage, the desert's thorny embrace. Radio crackled faintly. "All rangers, Arch's perimeter breached. Infected from Moab spilling in. Canyonlands reporting hordes on the bridges." Moab, our lifeline town, now a funnel for hell. Ellen slumped beside me, sweat beading on her forehead, the bite's edges darkening. 12 years in this Utah red rock maze, and I'd never felt the walls closing so tight. The substation was 8 miles north, uphill, exposed. If we made it, maybe we could hold till nightfall. But with passengers, the math shifted. More noise, more risk, more chances for one bite to end us all. The truck crested a rise, Devil's Garden's arches visible in the distance like skeletal fingers against the sky. Groans faded behind, but the wind carried new ones, faint, multiplying from the east. Arches wasn't containing this. It was spreading through every crack and crevice. The maintenance trail narrowed ahead, a rutted scar through the juniper scrub that I'd used for supply runs 100 times. Sagebrush clawed at the truck's fenders, releasing a sharp, resinous scent that cut through the cab's tension. Maria clutched Luca in the back, the boy's small frame pressed against her, while Ellen's breathing grew shallower beside me, ragged like wind through a dry wash. I downshifted, the engine growling low to avoid drawing ears. 8 miles to the substation, mostly uphill, winding past the Garden of Eden formations where tourists loved to pose. But today, those rock windows would funnel sound, amplify every mistake. My ranger map unrolled in my mind. Avoid the main loop, cut through the primitive loop's edge where the arches thinned out. Arches National Park's beauty was its curse now. Open sightlines meant nowhere to hide from a swarm. A jolt rocked us as the wheel hit a washout, deeper than last season's rains had carved. Luca whimpered, and Maria shushed him, her tire iron wedged between her knees like a talisman. Radio static broke the quiet again, a ranger's voice cutting through. "This is Fiery Furnace Patrol. Lost visual on 3 hikers near Partition Arch. They're turning on each other. Infected moving west toward the highway. Moab's roads are jammed. State troopers firing on crowds at the Arch's entrance." Moab jammed. That sealed it. No evac through town. The substation's satellite phone might punch through to State HQ in Salt Lake, but we had to get there first. I glanced at Ellen. Her skin glistened with fever sweat, the bandage spotting through. Bite protocol from training. Monitor for 36 hours. But out here, with no medevac, that window was shrinking fast. The trail crested into a shallow basin, dotted with pinon pines that cast fleeting shadows. Heat waves danced off the slick rock, pushing the cab toward 100 degrees even with vents open. I rationed the AC off to save fuel, diesel gauge dipping lower than I'd like after the off-road detour. Ellen stirred, eyes fluttering. "How far?" Her voice was a whisper, dry as the sand under our tires. 5 miles. Hang in." I kept it clipped, focus on the path. But inside, doubt gnawed. She'd been exposed first, could turn mid-drive. Maria met my eyes in the rear view, her expression hard, protecting her own as any mother would. Luca stared out the window at a distant arch, oblivious or in shock, his small hands twisting his shirt. We pushed on, the truck laboring up a grade where the trail hugged a sheer drop-off. Red rock plummeted 100 feet, to a boulder-strewn gully below, the kind of fall that ended rescues before they started. I'd repelled worse for lost climbers, but not with civilians aboard. The wind howled through the fins overhead, carrying a faint chorus of moans, echoes from the main road or something closer. I eased off the gas, scanning the horizon. There, movement at the basin's rim, a cluster of figures spilling from the primitive loop trail. 10, maybe more, infected hikers in faded REI gear, staggering like they'd summited too fast without water. One clutched a trekking pole like a weapon, another dragged a day pack, spilling granola bars into the dust. They'd come from the backcountry campsites, probably turned overnight, now funneled by the terrain toward our narrow escape. "Down!" I hissed, killing the engine. Silence dropped heavy, broken only by the distant scrape of their boots on stone. Maria pulled Luca under the seat, tire iron ready. Ellen slumped, murmuring incoherently. I slipped out, Glock low and ready, using the truck's bulk for cover. The air baked my uniform, sweat tracing salty paths down my spine, the desert's dry heat sapping strength faster than any winter patrol. Crouched behind a boulder, I counted, shamblers mostly, but 2 faster ones weaving through, runners, maybe fresh turns. Arch's isolation worked against us here. No backup, no wide-open flats to outrun them. The lead runner spotted the truck first, head snapping toward the glint of metal. A guttural snarl carried on the wind, pulling the group into a ragged charge. They poured down the slope, bodies tumbling over loose scree, kicking up red clouds that choked the view. First shot, clean headshot on the runner, body crumpling mid-stride. The crack echoed off the arches. A mistake. Sound drew them faster. I fired again, dropping a shuffler, but they closed the gap, 20 yards now, arms outstretched, faces twisted in vacant hunger. My pulse thrummed in my ears, hands steady from years sighting coyotes at dawn. But this was no animal cull. Backpedaling to the truck, I yanked the door. "Maria, start it. Reverse down the grade." She scrambled to the wheel, Luca yelping as she floored it backward, tires spinning before catching traction. Ellen groaned, sliding half off the seat. An infected breached the boulder line, a woman in a sun hat, eyes milky, lunging with surprising speed. I swung the Glock up, but she was on me, nails raking my arm through the sleeve. Pain flared hot and sharp, but I drove my elbow into her throat, Ranger close quarters training from law enforcement drills kicking in. She staggered, and I finished it point blank, the muzzle flash searing my vision briefly. The truck's taillights flared red as Maria gunned it, infected piling against the rear bumper. One clawed the tailgate, denting metal before tumbling under the wheels with a sickening crunch. We gained distance, the grade steepening, but the herd followed. A dust-choked wave pouring into the basin like floodwater through a slot canyon. Maria slid back to the passenger side, breathless. "They're still coming. Kid's okay, but—" I nodded, wiping blood, hers or mine, from my forearm. The scratch burned, shallow but angry. Ellen's head lolled, her bite-mark hand twitching unnaturally. 12 years enforcing park rules. Leave no trace. Protect the wild. But here in Utah's red heart, the wild was turning on itself. The substation loomed in my thoughts. Supplies, radio, a defensible ridge overlooking Devil's Garden. If we held the high ground, we could signal for extraction, before nightfall brought colder shadows and bolder predators. A fresh radio burst. Landscape arch viewpoint compromised, infected swarming the viaduct, Grand County sheriffs pulling back to Green River. Green River, 50 miles north, our fallback if Salt Lake went dark. But the moans behind us grew louder, the desert wind funneling them like a siren call. Arches, vast arches, once symbols of endurance, now framed a nightmare chase. I reloaded, chambering around, the metallic click a small anchor in the chaos. We'd bought time, but the park's maze was closing ranks, and one wrong turn would bury us all. The grade leveled out into a stretch of slick rock plateau, the truck's tires humming over the fused sandstone that formed Archie's backbone. Maria gripped the door handle, her knuckles pale, while Luca peered over the seatback, silent eyes wide on the dust trail fading behind us. I kept the speed steady, 30 miles an hour max. Too fast here meant a skid into a crevice, and the herd's moans had thinned to echoes carried by the relentless wind. We rattled past the primitive loop's edge, where massive boulders loomed like silent sentinels, their shadows stretching long in the climbing sun. The air through the cracked window carried the sharp tang of creosote bushes, mixed with the acrid bite of gunpowder still clinging to my clothes. Ellen shifted beside me, a low murmur escaping her lips, her bandaged arm limp against the seat. The fever had her in its grip now, skin hot to the touch when I checked at the last stop, pulse racing like a cornered jackrabbit. Radio hissed to life unbidden, a garbled voice from Canyonlands across the border. Arches units, infected breaching the Needles district. Moab Hospital overrun, patients attacking staff. Head for higher ground, avoid the river. Moab's hospital, our go-to for serious injuries. If it was gone, so was any real medical aid. I thumbed the mic briefly. This is Archer's Trail Patrol en route to Devil's Garden Sub. 3 civilians, 1 exposed. Status? Static answered, the connection dropping like a stone into a dry wash. 5 miles left, but the plateau exposed us. Open views meant we'd be spotted from afar if more infected funneled from the east. Ellen bolted upright suddenly, eyes unfocused, a guttural rasp building in her throat. Water, please. Her hands clawed at the air, nails scraping the dash, then turned toward me, fingers brushing my sleeve where the scratch burned. Maria tensed in the back, tire iron shifting in her lap. Luca whimpered, burying his face in her side. I swerved the truck onto a faint service track, hidden by a low ridge of fins, killing the engine behind a cluster of junipers. The sudden quiet amplified everything, the wind sighing through needles, distant gravel crunch of approaching feet. Ellen's labored breaths turning wet and ragged. Her bite had progressed faster than any snake envenomation I'd treated, veins darkening under the skin, sweat beading cold despite the heat. Ranger First Aid drilled isolation for exposures, but out here with no quarantine unit, it meant a choice I dreaded. "Ellen, look at me," I said low, pinning her wrists gently with one hand, while reaching for the restraint straps from the kit. She thrashed, strength unnatural, her gaze locking on Luca with a hunger that twisted my gut. 12 years pulling hypothermic climbers from these rocks. I'd seen delirium, but this was invasion, something rewriting her from the inside. Maria whispered urgently from the back, "She's gone, isn't she? We can't." The dilemma hit like dehydration in noon sun. Restrain her and risk the noise drawing the herd, or end it quick and preserve the group's odds. Protocol for wildlife threats was clear. Dispatch if imminent danger. But Ellen was a visitor, a mom from Ohio, who'd trusted the park's safety. Leaving her to turn fully meant a liability in the cab, one bite away from dooming Luca, Maria, and my own shot at the substation. The wind picked up, rattling the junipers, carrying faint moans that confirmed the herd hadn't given up. I chose restraint first, looping the straps around her ankles and wrists, securing her to the seat anchor. She bucked against them, the truck rocking slightly, a zipper-teeth growl escaping her lips. Immediate consequence, the noise peaked her volume, and in the rear view, dust clouds rose from the plateau's rim. The infected closing, drawn like moths to a flare. Maria's eyes met mine, hard with accusation, but she nodded once, tire iron ready for what came next. We couldn't wait. I restarted the engine, the rumble masking Ellen's struggles as I punched it toward the track's end. The service path dipped into a narrow wash, walls of red Navajo sandstone rising 20 feet on either side, arches slot canyons in miniature, perfect for funneling threats but also trapping us if blocked. Heat pressed in. The cab a sauna now, my uniform soaked through, the scratch on my arm throbbing with each bump. Dehydration clawed at the edges of my focus. I'd rationed sips from the bladder earlier, but sweat poured out faster than I could replace. Luca's small voice broke the strain. Is she a monster now? Maria shushed him, but the question hung, innocent and brutal. I glanced back, forcing calm. She's sick, kid. We're getting to a safe spot to help. Lie again, but kids needed anchors, even in this. The wash narrowed, boulders forcing a crawl, the truck scraping undercarriage on stone. Ellen's thrashing intensified, straps creaking, her head slamming the window, crack of glass spiderwebbing. Then the wash opened to an overlook above Devil's Garden, the substation's low building visible half a mile downslope, its solar panels glinting like a promise. But the final obstacle loomed. A flash flood scar had washed out the descent, a 10-foot drop into loose talus, impassable for the truck. Infected dotted the garden below, dozens, swarming around landscape arches span, bodies tangled in the viaduct like debris in a river. They'd turned the iconic viewpoint into a kill zone, visitors who'd sought the world's longest freestanding arch, now shambling beneath it. Maria leaned forward, voice tight. Can we go around? Her free hand steadied Luca, who clutched a water bottle like a shield. Too exposed, we'd be picked off. The wind whipped dust devils across the talus, stinging my eyes through the open window, the dry earth smell choking. Ellen's growls peaked into a scream, shattering the side glass, bloodied shards raining in, one nicking my cheek. The sound carried, heads below snapping up, the swarm shifting toward our position like a tide turning. No choice now. I slung my pack, grabbing the extraction rope from the kit, standard for cliff rescues in these parts. Maria, get Luca out the back. We'll rappel down, skirt the Talus to the station. Leave her. Straps hold for now. But if she breaks free... I trailed off, the moral weight settling. Abandoning an exposed civilian violated every ranger oath, but saving the healthy meant prioritizing the future. Consequence immediate. As we piled out, Ellen's screams redoubled, pulling half the swarm upslope while we scrambled. The rappel was brutal, rope-biting palms slick with sweat, boots skidding on scree, Luca whimpering on Maria's back in a makeshift harness I'd improvised from webbing. My legs burned, exhaustion creeping in like the afternoon heat, each breath a labored pull against the thinning air at this elevation. The scratch on my arm wept clear fluid, infection or sweat, I couldn't tell. Arches terrain, once a playground for patrols, now exacted its toll. Unforgiving drops, loose rock that shifted underfoot, the vast exposure leaving no margin for error. We hit the garden floor running, the substation's door in sight, metal reinforced, keypad lock I'd changed last month. But Ellen's cries echoed, the swarm splitting, some climbing toward the truck, others veering our way. Maria stumbled, Luca slipping, and I hauled them up, muscles screaming from the strain. 12 years in this Utah wilderness had honed me for endurance, but not endless flight. Thirst clawed my throat, vision blurring at the edges. A lone figure broke from the swarm ahead, a fellow ranger, badge glinting on his vest, waving us on. "Alex, inside now!" His name was Reyes from the fire crew, rifle slung. Relief flickered, but as we barreled past he glanced back at the ridge. "Who's screaming up there?" Moral callback hit hard. The woman I'd tried to save, now bait drawing death. Reyes keyed the door, but the first infected crested the talus, tumbling down in a heap. Gunfire cracked, his, mine, dropping 3 before we sealed inside. The lock clicked, cool air from the vents a brief mercy, but Ellen's distant wails filtered through, a reminder that choices in arches left traces, permanent as petroglyphs on stone. Reyes barred the door, breath heaving. "Heard your radio. Thought you were gone." Luca collapsed against Maria, silent tears tracking dust on his cheeks. The substation hummed with backup power, maps pinned to walls showing the park's veins, trails, canyons, now potential kill paths. Outside, moans swelled, the swarm converging. We'd reached haven, but the cost tallied quick. Ellen abandoned to turn fully, my scratcher wildcard, and Reyes's grim nod confirming the park's fall. Moab's dark, Salt Lake's ordering evac, but choppers aren't coming. Arches, my 12-year vigil, wasn't sanctuary anymore. It was the arena, and nightfall loomed with colder teeth. The substation's fluorescent hum buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on the concrete walls lined with topo maps and emergency kits. Reyes wiped sweat from his brow, his fire crew vest stained with red dust as he double-checked the door's deadbolt. Maria cradled Luca on a metal bench, the boy's face buried in her shirt, while I leaned against the supply counter, the scratch on my arm pulsing like a second heartbeat. We caught our breath in the relative cool, the AC unit rattling against the desert's assault outside. I'd patched my arm quick, antiseptic wipe from the first aid station, gauze tight, but the skin around it itched, warm in a way that spoke of more than abrasion. Reyes rummaged through the comms drawer, pulling out the satellite phone, its screen flickering to life. Power's holding, solar backup kicked in an hour ago. His voice was steady, the kind honed from wildfire seasons when flames licked the canyon rims. Luca peeked out, eyes red-rimmed. "Is the monster lady okay?" Maria hushed him softly, but her gaze flicked to me, sharp with unspoken blame. The substation was a fortress by design. Thick walls for windstorms, reinforced for rockfalls. But it trapped us too, with windows barred and vents too small for escape. Arch's isolation, once a perk for backcountry patrols, now meant no quick run to the highway. I unrolled a park map on the table, tracing the Devil's Garden loop with my finger. We'd bought hours, not safety. Outside, the moans built like a gathering storm, muffled through the walls but insistent, bodies scraping against metal. Reyes keyed the radio, scanning frequencies. Static gave way to a burst from state dispatch. All Utah parks, Arches, Canyonlands, Capitol Reef. Infected vectors confirmed via tourist influx. Moab ER collapsed at 1100 hours. Grand Junction reporting border closures. Evacuate to high ground, await federal airlift. Grand Junction, Colorado line, our northern lifeline, already sealing off. I gripped the table edge, knuckles aching. 12 years radioing lost hikers from these very consoles, coordinating with BLM rangers across the Red Rock expanse, and now the network frayed like old rope. The desert didn't flood easy, but this outbreak poured through every trailhead, every RV park from St. George to Price. Maria stood, tire iron still in hand. "We can't just wait. My boy's thirsty." Luca nodded, parched lips cracking, and I saw the toll. His small frame wilted from the morning's heat, dehydration setting in faster than in any summer patrol. Supplies check, 4 gallons of water in the cache, protein bars, MREs for a week if rationed. But with 4 of us, no 3 now, Ellen's fate a ghost, the math squeezed tight. I filled canteens from the purifier, the water tasting metallic but clean, handed one to Luca first. Moral snag twisted again. Ellen's screams had faded on the ridge, but abandoning her meant her turning fully up there, a beacon drawing more infected to our door. Ranger code echoed in my head. Protect visitors, preserve life. But protocol bent under survival's weight. Reyes caught my eye, reading the doubt. "You did what you could." Bites like that. Wildlife training says isolate or cull. She's past isolation. His words landed heavy, the consequence chaining back. By saving Maria and Luca, we'd stretched thin, but leaving Ellen bought our entry here. Now, with Reyes vouching for the station's defenses, that choice echoed in the barred windows. Safety for some, loss for one. The wind outside howled, rattling the solar panels, carrying the dry scent of dust through the vents, a reminder that Archie's afternoons baked unforgiving, turning concrete ovens by dusk. We fortified quick. Reyes and I dragged supply crates to block the side entrance, muscles burning from the rappel's strain. My legs trembled, exhaustion seeping in like sand through cracks. 12 hours on shift, no real food since dawn coffee, the desert's heat-sapping reserves. Altitude here wasn't killer like the LaSalle's, but combined with adrenaline crash, it blurred my edges, vision spotting when I straightened too fast. Luca sipped slowly. Maria murmuring thanks, but tension coiled. "What's the plan?" she asked, voice low, tire iron tapping her knee. "Hold till nightfall, radio for pickup at the helipad ridge. I've signalled cords before for medevacs." I pointed to the map's northern edge, a flat overlook above the garden where choppers could land if winds dropped. Reyes nodded, but his face tightened. Fuel for the Jenny's low. If power dips, lights out, and those things outside, they'll cluster at any noise. The radio crackled again, a ranger from Dead Horse Point, 30 miles west, voice strained. "Archer's sub-copy? Infected herds massing at the Colorado River overlook. Tour buses flipped on 191. Blanding's sheriff's office silent. They're adapting, climbing the slick rock now, not just shambling." Adapting. The word chilled deeper than evening drop. I'd tracked coyote packs learning to raid campsites, but this, hikers turned, scaling fins they'd never climbed alive, meant the park's terrain wouldn't slow them forever. Outside, a thud shook the wall, heavier than wind. Something testing the door, fingers probing cracks. Luca froze, water bottle slipping from his hand. I moved to the window slit, peering through bars. The swarm had thickened under landscape arch, bodies weaving through the viaduct's shadows, drawn by Ellen's earlier cries. Sun dipped lower, painting the red rock in bloody hues, heat radiating off stone like a furnace. My throat scratched dry despite the sip. Dehydration's grip tightened, head pounding in rhythm with the thuds. Reyes loaded the station shotgun, Remington 870, shells from the lockbox, while Maria wedged Luca behind crates. "We need eyes on the helipad," I said, grabbing binoculars. "I'll scout the roof access. If clear, we move at twilight. Cooler, less visibility for them." But as I climbed the ladder, the thuds multiplied, a rhythmic pounding like hail on tin. The roof hatch creaked open to blistering air, the plateau stretching endless under a sky turning bruise purple. In the distance, dust rose from the eastern boundary, more infected spilling from Moab's direction, funneling through the park's veins. A sharp crack split the air below, glass shattering inside. Luca's scream followed, high and piercing. I spun, heart slamming, the binoculars clattering to the gravel. The swarm had found a weak spot, the vent grate buckling under weight, and something was forcing its way in. Archer's haven cracked, and nightfall wouldn't save us if we didn't fight for it now. I vaulted down the ladder, boots slamming the concrete floor 2 rungs at a time. The substation's air turned thick with dust and fear sweat, the metallic tang of spilled water from Luca's bottle sharp in my nose. Shouts echoed from the main room. Reyes barking orders, Maria's voice rising in panic. As the vent grate groaned, fingers clawing through the mesh like roots prying stone. We converged at the utility closet door, the only barrier between us and the breach. Reyes shouldered his shotgun, eyes locked on the buckling metal, while Maria scooped Luca behind a stack of fire extinguishers, her tire iron gripped white-knuckled. The infected's rasps filtered through, wet and insistent, the sound vibrating the walls like a distant rock slide. My Glock felt small in my palm, but 12 years sighting threats in these canyons had taught me precision over power, headshots for runners, body for shamblers to conserve rounds. "Seal it," I snapped, grabbing a crowbar from the tool rack. We wedged it through the handles, muscles straining against the pull from outside. The grate gave way with a screech, an arm thrusting in. Pale, veined black, ending in nails caked with red sand. It swiped blindly, catching air inches from Reyes's boot. He fired once, the boom deafening in the confined space, muzzle flash lighting the infected's twisted face before it slumped back, blood spraying the wall in dark arcs. Silence crashed in, broken only by our heaving breaths and Luca's muffled sobs. The wind outside howled through the fresh gap, carrying the dry, baked earth scent of the plateau, cooling the sweat on my skin, but doing nothing for the itch in my arm's scratch. We'd bought seconds, not safety. The swarm's weight pressed the door, thuds multiplying like hail on slick rock. Archer's nights dropped cold, but this assault turned the substation into a pressure cooker, heat from our bodies and the failing Jenny building fast. Reyes reloaded, shells clicking into the chamber with practiced calm. "Vents are compromised all around. We can't hold the whole building." His voice cut low, fire crew grit shining through. He'd coordinated burns in these winds before, reading flames like I read trails. Maria nodded, tire iron ready, but her eyes darted to the kid, weighing the risk. Luca clutched her leg, small frame trembling, his earlier question about monsters now a living fear in the dim light. I scanned the room, mind-mapping escapes like a backcountry route. Roof access too exposed, side door blocked by crates, but the emergency tunnel under the floor dug for flash flood evac leading to a maintenance shed half a mile east. It was narrow, dusty, meant for one ranger at a time, but with the swarm piling up it was our vein through the rock. The dilemma clawed quick. Drag civilians through the dark, risk Luca panicking and alerting more, or split up. Reyes and I draw fire here, buy them time. Protocol for multi-casualty incidents, evacuate the vulnerable first. But splitting meant maybe never regrouping, and Reyes was the only other ranger left. His knowledge of the garden's hidden paths irreplaceable. The door buckled inward an inch, groans swelling outside. Tunnel it is, I decided, voice firm to anchor them. Reyes, cover the breach. Maria, grabbed the kid and the pack, water medkit flares. No time for debate. The choice locked, consequence immediate as I pried the floor hatch, hinges protesting in the stale air below. Dust billowed up, coating my throat with grit, the tunnel's cool draft a brief mercy against the rising panic. We dropped in single file, Luca whimpering as Maria lowered him first, his sneakers scuffing the packed earth. The space cramped my shoulders. Walls rough-hewn sandstone that snagged my uniform, the scent of damp soil and old rat droppings thick in the confines. I led, flashlight beam cutting the dark, navigating by memory, 200 yards straight, then a dogleg left under the primitive loop. Ranger training for cave-ins. Breathe steady, mark turns with chalk if lost. But with moans echoing above, muffled through layers of rock, every scrape felt amplified, the desert's silence betraying us. Halfway Luca's cough echoed sharp, pulling a hushed curse from Maria. "Quiet, mijo," she whispered, hand over his mouth, but the sound carried. Faint thuds above shifted, like the swarm sensing prey below. My arm throbbed, the gauze loosening in the crawl, sweat stinging the wound. Exhaustion hit harder now, muscles leaden from the day's patrols and chases, dehydration blurring the edges of my vision. 12 years in Utah's red rock had built endurance for solo treks, but herding a family through this burrow tested limits I didn't know I had. The dogleg opened to a junction, left to the shed, right an old survey shaft, blind and useless, but voices filtered from ahead, not groans, human shouts, panicked and close. Looters? Other rangers? The tunnel's mouth loomed, faint light seeping from the shed's cracked door. I killed the flashlight, signaling halt, the group's breath sinking ragged in the black. Reyes brought up the rear, shotgun scraping stone, his presence a steady weight. Outside the wind gusted, rattling what sounded like loose tin on the shed roof, masking our approach. We emerged into the maintenance shed, tools scattered like a hasty retreat, shovels, fuel cans, a jeep half-loaded with supplies. But figures moved in the shadows. 2 men, rough cut, one rifling a cabinet, the other standing guard with a hunting rifle scavenged from a visitor's rig. They weren't infected, but their eyes lit feral at our intrusion. Looters claiming the park's bones, blanding transients maybe, judging by the accents when one spun toward us. "Hands up, Rangers!" the guard snarled, rifle steady, his partner emerging with a crowbar. Maria pulled Luca back into the tunnel mouth, tire iron hidden. The air reeked of spilled diesel and sweat, the desert night pressing cool through open slats, stars pricking the sky beyond. Moral chain tightened. These men could be allies against the swarm, or they'd take our gear and leave us for the infected. Reyes tensed beside me, shotgun low, but shooting first meant noise drawing the horde from the substation half a mile back. I raised my hands slow, Glock holstered, but ready. "We're heading east, helipad evac. You with Park Service." Lie threaded in, buying assessment. The guard's eyes narrowed, rifle dipping slightly. "Park's done. We're taking what we need. Hand over the pack." Choice crystallized. Comply and lose our water. Risk dehydration, dooming Luca by dawn, or fight and gamble on Reyes's shot. The wind shifted, carrying distant moans from the garden, the swarm spreading, Arch's vastness no longer empty. I nodded to Reyes, subtle, and lunged left as the shotgun boomed, the guard crumpling. Chaos erupted, the crowbar man charging, but Maria swung from the shadows, her tire iron connecting with a crack. He dropped, groaning, but alive. Consequence deferred, but blood on our hands now, blurring the line between survival and something darker. We stripped their gear quick, extra ammo, a radio crackling with static, leaving them bound with zip ties from the shed. Luca stared wide-eyed, the innocence cracking like dry earth underfoot. The Jeep's keys hung on a hook. I hotwired it in seconds, Ranger maintenance skills flipping wires in the dark. Engine growled low, headlights off as we peeled into the night trail, the shed fading behind. But the radio burst alive. Arches all points, infected breaching eastern boundary. They're climbing the fins now, heading for the helipad overlook. The plateau stretched black ahead, junipers whispering in the cooling wind. But moans rose on the breeze, closer, adapting to the dark. My arm burned hotter, vision spotting, the night's chill seeping in as exhaustion clawed deeper. We'd escaped the substation, but Arch's maze tightened, and the helipad's promise flickered like a dying flare. One wrong ridge, and the desert would swallow us whole. The Jeep's engine rumbled low, a guttural purr that vibrated through the seat into my bones. We bounced over the rutted service trail, headlights off to avoid painting targets on our backs, the plateau's slick rock swallowing the tires like quicksand. Junipers blurred into dark silhouettes against the star-pricked sky, their resinous scent sharp in the rushing air through the cracked window. Maria held Luca close in the back, his small breath steadying now, while Reyes scanned the rear with the scavenged rifle, his silhouette tense against the faint glow of the dashboard. Night had fallen hard over Arches, the kind that turned the vastness intimate and cruel. No moon yet to light the fins, just the cold bite of wind slicing through at 40 miles an hour. My arm throbbed under the gauze, a deep ache radiating up to my shoulder, sweat cooling sticky on my skin despite the chill. Exhaustion pulled at me like gravity on a steep descent, vision tunneling from dehydration, each blink heavier than the last. 12 years navigating these night patrols by starlight and memory, but tonight the stars mocked us, indifferent witnesses to the moans swelling on the breeze behind. A shadow loomed ahead, a narrow defile between two massive rock spires, the trail funneling like a slot canyon on steroids. I eased off the gas, the Jeep slowing to a crawl, gravel crunching under the chassis. Radio static crackled from the dash, Reyes thumbing it low. Arch's east flank, infected massing at Sand Dune Arch. They're scaling the north rim, drawn to vehicle noise. Blanding's gone dark, no response from Hanksville. Hanksville, the dusty outpost 30 miles south, our fuel stop for long hauls. If it was silent, the whole southeast Utah grid was fracturing, infected spilling from tourist traps like Colorado National Monument. The defile narrowed, walls rising sheer 20 feet, trapping the wind into a howl that drowned the engine. I killed it entirely, coasting into the shadows, the sudden quiet amplifying Luca's whisper from the back. "Are we hiding now?" Maria shushed him, her hand stroking his hair, but the question hung, a reminder of the kid's weight on us all. We were down to 2 canteens of water, ammo split thin, my Glock at 8 rounds, Reyes's rifle half full, and the helipad overlook a mile north, elevated with a clear line for any chopper from State HQ. But this defile was a choke point, perfect ambush terrain where shamblers could block both ends, turning escape into a kill box. Ranger search and rescue drilled for this, used the rock for cover, signal with mirrors at dawn, but with the swarm adapting, climbing like feral goats, waiting meant betting on luck we didn't have. I slipped out first, boots silent on the cool sand, Glock drawn low. The air nipped at my exposed neck, desert night dropping to the 40s fast, a shock after the day's bake. Wind tugged at the junipers overhead, needles rustling like warnings, carrying the faint rot of bodies left on the trails. Not graphic, just enough to turn the stomach. Reyes joined me, rifle up, while Maria stayed with Luca, the Jeep's bulk their shield. We crept forward, scouting the defile's mouth. Clear ahead but rearward, dust ghosts rose in the starlight, the herd's shambling forms a ragged line, maybe 50 strong, weaving through the plateau like smoke. "Push through," I murmured to Reyes, voice barely cutting the wind. "I'll cover the rear." He nodded, melting back to the Jeep, starting it with a low growl that echoed off the walls. The dilemma gnawed quick. Leave the engine off and risk getting boxed in on foot. Easy pickings for runners, or gun it and announce our path to every ear in the park. Protocol for night extractions. Minimize noise. Maximize speed. But with Luca's cough echoing faintly already, dry from the dust, we couldn't crawl. Choice made. Accelerate. Use the defile's echo to mask direction. We piled in, the jeep lurching forward as Reyes floored it from the passenger seat, Maria bracing Luca between her knees. The walls blurred, red sandstone a tunnel of black, the wind roaring through the open sides like a freight train. My arms screamed with each jolt, the bandage loosening, but I leaned out the window, sighting back. First shot dropped a lead shuffler, the crack swallowed by the defile's throat. They poured in behind, faster ones lunging over the fallen, their groans a chorus building, drawn by the engine's roar. Immediate fallout hit. The noise funneled them straight, closing the gap to yards as we burst from the far end, the plateau opening wide again. Stars wheeled overhead, the Milky Way a pale river but no relief in the beauty. Archer's night sky, once a ranger's compass, now just vast exposure. Luca whimpered, clutching Maria's arm, his small body slick with cooling sweat, the chill seeping into us all like doubt. Reyes handed back the rifle. Take it. Your eyes know these ridges better. I shouldered it, the weight grounding. 12 years sighting elk from fire towers, honing the aim. But exhaustion blurred the reticle, hands trembling from low blood sugar, the desert's cold amplifying every ache. We'd saved the jeep from the looters, gained mobility, but that fight's blood on our hands chained here. Noise from the scuffle might have pulled stragglers, turning a quiet crossing into this chase. Reyes keyed the radio mid-bounce. Helipad approach. Infected tailing, Estian 50, the request immediate evac, chords 38.7 north, 109.6 west. Static hissed back, then a faint reply from some distant tower, maybe Capitol Reef, voice clipped. Arches, hold position. Birds inbound from Provo, ETA 0200. Quarantine all bites. Wildlife vectors reported in Zion, gators in the Everglades turning to Zion, our sister park south, famous for Angels Landing's chains, now probably slick with worse than sweat. If animals were turning, the whole Utah wild was a powder keg. Coyotes and rattlers joining the fray. The helipad rose ahead, a flat gravel pad on the overlook's rim, edged by a sheer drop to the garden below, defensible with windbreaks from boulders, but open to any swarm scaling the east slope. Moans crested behind, the herd spilling from the defile like flood debris, stars glinting off their shambling forms. We skidded to a halt at the pad's edge, killing the engine, the wind's sigh the only sound now. I vaulted out, rifle up, directing Maria and Luca to the leeward boulders. Natural cover knee-high and solid. Reyes flanked me, shotgun racked, as the first infected crested the rim, tumbling over in a heap of limbs. Shots cracked in rhythm, mine dropping two, his blasting a cluster. But they kept coming, adapting to the slope, hands gripping slick rock like climbers on delicate Arch's face. Luca's cough turned to a hack, Maria pressing water to his lips, her face pale in the starlight. The cold deepened, frost edging the jeep's frame. My breath fogging as adrenaline ebbed, legs buckling under the weight of the day. Patrol to chase to siege. No pause. The scratch on my arm wept warm, veins tracing heat up my forearm, a whisper of the same fate Ellen had met. We'd reached the helipad, temporary high ground with a view to the horizon's black, but the swarm swelled, moans a tide lapping the rim. Reyes glanced at me, eyes questioning. Hold or push them back over the edge. The wind shifted, carrying rotor blades, faint, distant from the west. Evac incoming but minutes away, and the night's chill hardened. Arch's plateau turning tomb if we faltered. My finger tightened on the trigger, resolve stealing against the burn. We'd bought this perch with every choice, from Ellen's abandonment to the looter's fall, and it had to count. The first stars faded toward dawn, but the real light was that thrum growing, hope, fragile as a flare in the dark. The rotor thrum grew louder, slicing the night air like a lifeline uncoiling from the stars. We hunkered behind the boulders, breaths fogging in the plummeting cold, as the first infected crested the rim fully. 20 now, spilling over slick rock with unnatural grips, their forms black cutouts against the eastern glow. Reyes fired steady beside me, shotgun blasts punching holes in the line, while I picked off runners with the rifle's scope, each recoil jarring my arm's burn. Maria shielded Luca, her tire iron discarded for a scavenged flare gun from the jeep, the kid's cough muffled against her chest. The wind whipped dust across the helipad, carrying the sharp ozone bite of incoming rotors, the plateau's chill seeping through my uniform like ice water. We'd held the high ground for minutes that felt eternal. Arches Overlook, once a spot for sunset briefings, now a barricade etched in blood and grit. The lead chopper burst into view, a Black Hawk silhouette banking hard from the west, its searchlight stabbing the dark like an accusatory finger. Downwash hammered us, kicking up gravel that stung my face, the roar drowning the moans as it hovered, Doorgunner unleashing a burst that shredded the front of the swarm. Reyes whooped low, slinging his shotgun, but I stayed prone, sighting one last climber, a twisted hiker in a faded Utah Parks tee, fingers clawing the edge. My shot dropped him into the void, body tumbling silent into the garden below. Relief washed through me, raw and trembling, my legs giving out as I slumped against the rock. The cold stone pressed my back, grounding the shake in my hands, breath coming in gasps that steamed white. We'd made it, substation to helipad, through looters and Ellen's ghost. But the cost etched deep. Her screams still echoed in my skull, a callback to that Wash decision, her abandonment buying our crawl through the tunnel. Now, with the swarm fracturing under gunfire, the park's red spires loomed indifferent, stars wheeling overhead as if nothing had shattered. Reyes hauled me up, his grip firm on my shoulder. "They're dropping lines. Move!" Maria scooped Luca, the boy limp in her arms, his feverish heat cutting through the night air despite the wind's knife edge. We bolted for the extraction points, harnesses snapping on under the chopper's glare, standard ranger gear, webbing biting into my waist as the winch pulled us skyward. The ground fell away, infected clawing at the gravel below, their upturned faces pale smudges in the light. Arches unrolled beneath. Devil's Garden, a tangled mass of bodies under landscape arch, trails like veins pulsing with shadows, the vast plateau swallowing the chaos we'd fled. Aboard, the crew chief slapped my back, voice booming over the engines. "Arches, Ranger. Salt Lake's got a quarantine LZ at the airbase. Bites?" His eyes flicked to my bandaged arm, the gauze spotted dark now, heat radiating like a buried coal. I nodded once, the throb sharpening into fire, veins tracing black lines under the skin. Ellen's fate mirroring in my flesh, the scratch from that basin lunge no mere wound. Moral weight settled heavy, by sparing the infected woman in the fight, pushing her back instead of finishing clean. I'd invited this doubt, a wild card that could turn me mid-flight. Reyes caught my glance, his face hardening. He'd seen it too, the chain from that mercy pulling tight. Luca stirred on the bench, medics swarming him with IVs, Maria's hand never leaving his. "He'll pull through," she murmured, exhaustion carving lines in her face, but gratitude flickered. We'd shared the last water back at the shed, a small act amid the looter's greed, paying off now in her steady gaze. The chopper banked east, rotors chopping the dark, the crew's radio buzzing with wider hell. Zion's Angels landing overrun, climbers turning mid-chain, Yellowstone geysers boiling infected herds, Everglades Rangers reporting gator attacks on the turned whole ecosystem flipping, DC declaring National Parks Ground Zero, bombing runs prepped for urban spillovers. Utah's red rock faded below, arches a darkening scar under the chopper's belly, its arches silent witnesses to the first night's toll. 12 years patrolling those canyons, pulling families from flash floods, educating tourists on fragile soil. Gone to this, a tomb of stone and shamblers where beauty lured the doom. The wind through the open door nipped colder, my arms fever spiking shivers, but resolve hardened in the core. I'd survived the outbreak's teeth, ranger skills carving this fragile evac, but the wild didn't forgive infection. Reyes leaned close, voice low over the din. "Quarantine'll sort the scratch." "We hold the line from there." I nodded, staring into the black horizon, the thrum vibrating bone deep. Arches had been sanctuary, teaching patience in its vast hush. Now it was Forge, hammering me for whatever war dawned. The chopper pushed on, stars blurring to streaks, but the moans lingered in memory. Not ended, just paused. Dawn crept eastern, pale on the Wasatch, and with it, the real siege. Not just Utah's parks falling, but the world's wild turning against us all. My hand clenched the harness, the burn a grim promise. I'd fight clean or turn with the rest, but Arches had etched survival into me, permanent as its stone. The chopper's cabin vibrated with a relentless thrum, the air thick with the scent of jet fuel and antiseptic wipes from the medics' kits. I sat strapped to the bench, arm elevated on a foam block, as the crew chief shone a penlight into the wound. The black veins spiderwebbed further now, pulsing hot under the skin, a mirror to Ellen's bite that I'd dismissed as a scratch. Cold sweat beaded on my forehead despite the cabin's dry heat, my stomach churning with the chopper's pitch. Reyes sat across, rifle confiscated, but his eyes locked on me. Trust frayed, the Ranger bond tested by this invisible threat. We touched down at the airbase quarantine LZ just past midnight, floodlights carving harsh white pools across the tarmac. Duggan Air Base, tucked in the Utah desert flats east of Provo, was a sprawl of hangars and razor wire. Far from Archer's red spires, but echoing its isolation. Medics swarmed as the doors slid open, cool night wind rushing in with the tang of sage and distant rain. They hauled Luca first on a stretcher, Maria trailing with a medic's arm around her shoulders, her last glance back laced with that shared water gratitude. Our small pact in the shed paying off in her silence. No accusations flung. Reyes moved next, cleared with a quick scan, but I hung back, the throb in my arm sharpening to knives with each heartbeat. The lead medic, a wiry woman in fatigues, pinned my sleeve up. Ranger? Exposure confirmed. Isolation tent, stat. Her voice cut clinical, no room for debate. Tension coiled in my chest. Quarantine meant separation. Me alone with the burn, while the others integrated into whatever survivor pool waited. Ranger protocol screamed assess the group, coordinate evac for all, but this base's rules bent for the infected, isolate to protect the herd. I nodded, letting them cuff a loose restraint on my good wrist, the metal cool and unyielding against my skin. Reyes paused at the door, jaw tight. We'll link up after. Hold steady. His words carried the weight of our tunnel crawl, the looter's blood a shared stain, but doubt flickered. Would he vouch for me if I turned? They marched me across the tarmac to a cluster of white tents, floodlights buzzing overhead like angry hornets. The wind gusted low, carrying faint moans from the perimeter fences, Archer's spill reaching even here, infected pressing the wire like shadows in the dark. Inside the tent, sterile air hit me, fluorescent strips humming on the ceiling, a cot and IV stand the only furniture. They hooked me to fluids, the needles prick a distant sting against the arm's fire, monitors beeping my vitals in rhythmic accusation. Relief ebbed quick, replaced by hollow ache as I slumped on the cot, legs heavy, the day's exhaustion crashing like a flash flood, muscles quivering, breath shallow, the desert chill seeping through the canvas walls. Alone, the costs tallied unbidden. Ellen's screams from the ridge, her abandonment in the wash a mercy I couldn't voice, now chaining to this bed. We'd gained the substation because of it, the tunnel escape, even the looter's jeep, but the moral compromise festered. Ranger oaths to protect every visitor shattered on that decision, leaving traces in Luca's wide eyes and Maria's guarded thanks. Reyes's trust hung fragile too. He'd covered the breach, shared the rifle, but if my scratch bloomed full infection, he'd be the one pulling the trigger, our partnership ending in a tent like this. The IV dripped cold into my vein, easing the thirst but not the isolation, the tent's walls closing like slot canyon stone. Radio chatter filtered from the adjoining command tent, voices overlapping in clipped urgency. Archers confirmed ground zero vector, tourist influx from Vegas and Denver airports. Zion's backcountry rangers silent since 2200, Angel's landing chains slick with turned climbers. Yellowstone's bison herd stampeding infected into geysers, but wolves adapting, packs hunting the living now. Global feeds dark, but London's parks overrun. Tokyo subways boiling with the changed. Feds prepping ordnance drops on urban cores, but national parks designated no-fly preserves. Too much wild overlap. The world widened beyond Utah's red rock. Arches just one fracture in a shattering globe. Wildlife turning, ecosystems flipping like the Everglades gators I'd heard rumors of. The outbreak not content with cities, but rewriting the wild. My park, with its fragile arches and endless trails, had drawn the first waves. Moab's crowds, Canyonland's spillover, now seeding the Wasatch and beyond. The monitor beeped faster, my pulse spiking at the thought. 12 years stewarding that vast hush, educating on no-trace ethics, now the soil crust trampled under shambling feet, delicate arch looming over a graveyard of visitors. Dawn crept grey through the tent flap, the wind dying to a whisper, carrying the faint scent of creosote from the flats outside. The medic returned, scanning the arm with a handheld device, her face unreadable. Fevers plateaued, antibiotics holding, for now. But quarantine's 24 minimum. No cure promised, just delay, the burn a low simmer under the skin. Reyes's voice echoed from the perimeter, coordinating with base rangers on supply runs, his survival a small victory amid the losses. Luca's cough had cleared, Maria reported. Our choices had threaded them through, but the hollow gnawed. Arches lost, its beauty a lure turned trap. The wilderness I'd trusted now indifferent to who claimed it. I lay back, the cot's canvas creaking under me, resolve hardening like cooled lava. We'd survived the first night, clawing from patrol to helipad through canyons that once taught endurance. But this was no end. The outbreak's teeth sank global, mutated behaviors in the wild hinting at evolutions we couldn't track. Arches National Park, my forge of stone and sky, had died and risen as something feral, its arches framing not endurance, but erasure. The war stretched ahead, quarantines to breaches, and I'd fight it clean. Ranger skills against the turned wild, or join the moans echoing from the fences. Dawn lightened the tent, pale and unforgiving, but in that fragile hold, I breathed steady. The real patrol just beginning.